It's a brand new day for sports, and good evening, good morning, wherever you may be across the world, from Los Angeles to the East Coast, and of course in Sid City. Let's Bet It by Superbook Sports with Jared Smith. I'm David Gascon. Thanks for joining us today. Jared, you were beaten, you were battered, but you are here for us. Thank God. I don't know how your TV's still standing, and of course that Jet shirt on. You're still loud and proud representing, but man, how you doing?
Yeah. Always loud and proud with Gangrene. I just love the printed T-shirts. They're so cool these days. Even though my teams, but actually, to be honest with you, the Jets are having a pretty good season. Even though they're running into some tough injury luck this week, but everything's going well. I mean, all things considered, I'm doing a lot better than Tom Brady's doing this morning. Let's just leave it at that.
It is brutal, and that'll be started with our entire show today. We talk about a bunch of different things. Thursday Night Football, Major League Baseball's World Series is finally here. The NBA, the National Hockey League, college football, obviously a big weekend slate of games. And, of course, more to come with Week 8 in the National Football League. And I say that because you got fans all across the world that are watching this show, whether you're overseas, internationally, whether you're in Hawaii, on the West Coast like we are, or, of course, on the East Coast, wherever you may be. Make sure you subscribe. You follow us on YouTube, on Twitter, Wise and Shine, a part of the daily feed when you look at the rundown and see exactly what you guys are doing all across the week, across every different sport. Make sure you click, subscribe, give us 5 stars. We, of course, will love you forever. But, yeah, going back to that game, Jared, Thursday Night Football is where we'll start things off. Tom Brady, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, fall 2 games under 500, losing at home to the Baltimore Ravens, 27-22. And, Jared, that's just a game that you watch for a couple different reasons. Obviously, to see if Tom Brady and the offense can wake up and look balanced in some kind of category. But, 2, to see if they can finally get a W. Now 2 games under 500. Is this more of what Baltimore did or more of what Brady and company could not do?
Well, the numbers say Brady was not a very good quarterback last night. Minus 4.5 CPOE, completion percentage over expectation. He missed a lot of throws. The Bucs didn't do anything that spectacularly. They didn't really defend that well in the second half. They made a crucial special teams error in the opening drive of the game, which gave the Ravens 3 points. I know the final score didn't really matter, but again, who knows what would have happened if that wasn't a muffed punt and maybe Brady goes down the field and scores. It started the angst very early on in the game for the Bucs. They get a stop on the first drive and then bang, 2 guys run into each other on special teams and the Ravens have first and goal. So it wasn't pretty from the start. And I think it felt like a Thursday night game. There were definitely a lot of injury concerns, the health, the wellness of the players. Certainly front and center, Mark Andrews didn't make it through the game. I think Baltimore also had a couple of corners get nicked up. Tampa Bay lost Shaq Barrett, I think, for the season. So the attrition nature of the NFL continues to rear its ugly head, especially on these Thursday night games. When I look at Lamar Jackson's numbers, pretty good. Not a huge ADOT, average depth of target. Wasn't really pushing the ball down the field, but completion percentage really strong, over expectation. They ran the ball very well in the second half. Gus Edwards was a big factor. And 93% of the Ravens series that started with a run ended successfully. So you could kind of see where the vibe is for this Baltimore team right now. It's Lamar Jackson and it's everybody else, and we'll see if the weapons continue to emerge around him. But got to be impressed if you're a Ravens fan. It was a very good performance last night, especially in the second half.
Yeah, they sit at 5-3 right now, and I think the biggest thing you look at in a ball game like this is not only the short week, Thursday Night Football, which you mentioned, but with all those elements, Gus Edwards obviously having back-to-back strong performances. Kenyon Drake got into the end zone as well, but
Yeah.
you run the ball 33 times for 231 yards. It's 7 yards a clip right down the throat of Tampa Bay, and I can't help but think, Jared, in this situation, every day that Baltimore continues to push forward, they continue to win, and Lamar Jackson's putting up solid numbers, they're writing a bigger check. I mean, that is stage one of regret right there, where you don't sign Lamar Jackson to a good, strong, massive deal with all kinds of guaranteed coin. Deshaun Watson gets his. He's got troubles. Lamar Jackson, the only trouble he's had is staying on the field for last season. But outside of that, if you're Baltimore, you have no other options that you can look at. Your hands are tied going into next season because you're going to be forking over a truckload of money.
Yeah, and especially, the optics of the rest of the division changed yesterday with the Jamar Chase news. So you have Baltimore and Cincinnati right now kind of neck and neck. Cincinnati, no cupcake game this week in Cleveland. We all know how those games can tend to be a little fluky. So we'll see. If the Ravens win 11 or 12 games and they win the AFC North, it's really hard to not give Lamar a lot of the credit.
Yeah, and you look at it on the other side of things, though, we go from the AFC to the NFC. And I tell you what, it's like I could blindfold you, put you in front of a dartboard, and you could just pick one team from the NFC to win that conference, let alone the NFC South. For as bad as that division is, do you still feel like it's Tampa Bay's?
No, I don't. I'll be honest, I don't really think there is a team in that division that I would prefer to bet on at this point. There's obviously betting value somewhere, right? Like, Tampa Bay at minus 160. I want to say they were a $3 or $4 favorite preseason. Maybe not that high. Maybe it was a $2 favorite. They were a heavy favorite to win that division in the preseason, and the odds are significantly shorter now. I'll be honest, that game, that Falcons game this weekend, I think is very intriguing. You talk about a Panthers team that played well against the Bucs, but not really that well. I don't really know what Carolina is with PJ Walker, but I think Atlanta's at least an average team, and maybe an average team wins that division this year. I think New Orleans has a very interesting game too at home against the Raiders. I think if I had to pick one of those two, Carolina is a throwaway. Like, it's a nice story, but it's they're not ready to win that division. It's either Carolina, Atlanta, or Tampa. I mean, listen, Carolina, Atlanta, or New Orleans. The Saints are 5-1 right now, and they're a slight home dog this week against the Vegas Raiders. That game did make my column this week, but not in a straight up category. I think New Orleans at 5-1. They get healthy with their defense. You can make worse bets probably.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, you look at Atlanta, and you mentioned them. They got ambushed last week by the Bengals, who carved them up in the first half. But prior to that, they humbled the San Francisco 49ers, a game in which you saw a couple takeaways against Jimmy Garoppolo. And that Atlanta Falcons offense does move up and down the field. Now, I know I temper that with the emotion of fantasy owners across the country, because there's one guy that does not touch the ball. And I guess Kyle Pitts is in someone's doghouse, but for some reason, a guy that had accolades coming into this campaign is a ghost when it comes to fantasy numbers and targets from Marcus Mariota. But nevertheless, this is an Atlanta team that you can't shy away from, especially as you mentioned. You don't know what you're getting from Tampa Bay week in and week out. It seems like their offense has certainly regressed. And I don't know. I mean, feel me on this, though, Jared. Tom Brady has Todd Bowles as the head coach. Byron Leftwich as the offensive coordinator. Is he making some kind of calls to Bruce Arians?
No, that would be. I think Bruce is actually involved with the team in some way. I've seen him.
Right.
Wasn't he reprimanded by the league for being on the sidelines and being a little too frisky earlier this season?
Yeah.
I do think he is part of the equation in some way. I don't know what I'll be honest. I don't think last night's game falls on Byron Leftwich's shoulders. I think they were relatively aggressive in that game. Brady went over all of his prop numbers. Mike Evans had a big game. They finally pushed the ball down the field. Again, I don't think there's like one human being that's like, yep, that's why the Bucs lost that game last night. But I'll be honest, that makes things a little more concerning because as a team, as a collective unit, Tampa Bay just isn't playing well. You know, when I watch Brady, there's moments where I'm like, yeah, he's 45. But then there's moments when he rips the ball down the field. And I'm like, yeah, this guy can still play in the league. It's really just the cohesion around him that just doesn't look 100%. The defense looked absolutely gassed last night too. And if Tampa's defense doesn't play well, you want to say what you want about the Bucs winning the Super Bowl. Go watch that game and tell me Tom Brady was the reason why they beat the Chiefs. It wasn't. It was the defense. If that defense doesn't play up to Todd Bowles' standard, who's now the head coach, you would think the defense would be along for the ride with him on that ascent. That's really the bigger issue that I think the Bucs have right now. And if Shaq Barrett's done for the year, as I read this morning, then that's even a bigger issue.
I think the bigger issue is the Tom Brady divorce that was just announced, don't you?
I think that was unfortunate. As a fellow divorcee, I feel your pain, Tom. I think he'll probably maybe be a little better off with some closure. My life finally started anew once I got some closure. I don't know. I'm just kind of reaching here. I don't get paid to analyze.
That's
divorces.
good. I mean, you Tom Brady's supermodel wives or ex-wives now. It's
yeah, right,
good.
Right,
I'm gonna put Jared
exactly
Smith,
the same.
Tom Brady, and Tiger Woods, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly the same situation with me and Tom. It's basically apples to apples. No, listen. I think there's physically Tom looks fine. I think physically Tom looks exactly how I would expect a 45-year-old quarterback with an elite, healthcare regime to look. Mentally, I think is where he doesn't look 100%. And I think we're naive if we think the off-field issues are not weighing on him. And it's hard to quantify that. It's actually impossible to quantify that. But it does need to be baked into your handicap on Tampa Bay every week. Maybe the bigger spreads especially are the ones you really need to stay away from. And I think the defense factors into that as well. But they're not as crisp. They're missing one or two plays a game than they normally would hit. You want to call it mental, issues. You want to call it new, receivers that are injured all the time. Julio Jones came back last night and caught a touchdown. Good for him. So there's just a lot of uncertainty there. And when you're betting on a sport, uncertainty is the chief of mischief.
Yeah. And it's one of those things when you look at not only a team, but also a quarterback in Tom Brady, a future Hall of Famer, obviously numerous Pro Bowls, numerous All-Pro teams, countless Super Bowls. But you put him, you put Manning, you put Aaron Rodgers in that same category of guys that you typically are thinking, hey, I'm going to back these guys week in and week out. They're not getting it done. You saw it last week. It wasn't an errant throw by him, but a 65-yard touchdown pass that should have been to Mike Evans. Flat out dropped. All of a sudden, they start chasing that game against Carolina. Go through obviously the divorce, the family issues. No, not at all. But it's just you, like you said, it's one time, another instance, and all of a sudden, a team that's regressing now going the opposite way. So a couple games under 500. We're talking so much about this game. We're going to get someone else involved as well. Frank Schwab from Yahoo Sports, a writer, obviously a compulsive gambler. All jokes aside, Frank. Thanks for joining the show today. Frank, I got to bring you into this conversation because we're talking so much not only about Tom Brady, but also the highlight here is Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Jackson didn't get the kind of money he wanted in the offseason, trying to negotiate a brand new deal with Baltimore. Sky's the limit for him in Baltimore, or do you see him escaping and going somewhere else to get paid? Because it certainly seems like Baltimore's going to have to write a massive check for him when the bank comes due.
Yeah, I mean, I assume at some point this is going to get worked out. Like, he's too good. He's too big of a part of what they do. I mean, even last night you saw it. They lose Andrews. They lose Bateman. They've already lost Dobbins. Ronnie Stanley's still basically working back from an injury. And they still find a way to win that game with Isaiah Likely and Devin Duvernay. I mean, he just lifts everybody on his shoulders. He's one of those rare guys in the NFL that can do that. And I get the Ravens issue with it too. They're probably sitting there thinking, you know what? I don't know that this guy's going to age that well. I don't know that he's probably going to be on the Cam Newton path more than the Tom Brady path. Let's put it that way. And so, do you want to lay out however much money over however many years, knowing that, Lamar might not be an elite guy past 30 years old, just the way he plays. It's very complicated. And it's also complicated that Lamar's his own agent. We don't know what's going on. There's not been much reported about this at all. I mean, it is usually, how it goes. Agents leak stuff out. Oh, they only offer this much with this much guaranteed, and say it's an anonymous source. We don't know what's been offered. I haven't seen anything, at least, very specific on why this hasn't gotten done. So it'll be interesting. I assume it'll get done just because, again, he's such a big part of what they do. But the fact that it's dragged on this long makes you wonder, hey, what's going to happen next with Lamar Jackson?
Another quarter, big deal. He's got a big game in London this week. Russell Wilson. I'll be honest. I have been waiting to buy low on this Denver offense. The talent's there. The defense is there. I'm crazy, right? Eventually, I think they're going to play a little better offensively than they've played. And again, it's really about the talent around Russ. Say what you want about Russ himself, corny as it gets. The talent around him is still pretty good, maybe a little thinner than it should be because of some injuries. But am I crazy? I don't trust the Jags as a favorite. I trusted them last week as a favorite. They don't look like they can – a ton of talent, but they don't look like they have the polish to close out games. So why should I trust the Jags as a favorite this week on a neutral field?
I mean, it's tough to trust them, I'll tell you that. If this game was in the middle of a Sunday, I probably wouldn't touch it. The fact that it's standalone probably means I want to do something with it. And I can tell you this much. I do not want to spend 3 hours praying that the Denver Broncos can move the ball. I've been through that. I don't enjoy it. They're just broken on offense right now. Russ looks so hesitant.
It's tough to watch.
He's been hurt, obviously. I don't know how much that plays into it. Everybody – I'm based in Colorado. Every single person in Colorado wants Nathaniel Hackett fired yesterday. It's just a bad scene with the Denver Broncos right now, and Godspeed to you if you want to bet on the Denver Broncos right now and try to back them through 3 hours. Fair. Because
I think it's a good teaser spot through both.
It might be. What do you think about that? It is so painful to watch them. But you're right about Jacksonville. Like, Trevor Lawrence is not that dude. He's just not. Like, at some point we just have to admit, maybe he becomes it. I don't know. But for all of this guy's the next John Elway, this guy's next Andrew Luck. Nope, it ain't happening yet. He's had a few games. He's had a few games where you're like, okay, I can see it, but then it's just not consistent week to week. I don't trust Jacksonville. I definitely don't trust Denver. What a weird game to give to London, and it's on ESPN Plus of all things. Like, I mean, who's
is waking
it
really?
up? Yeah, it is. Who's waking up early in the morning and being like, where do I find this game? It's not on TV. Oh, I gotta sign up. I'm just going back to bed. Like, this is the ultimate like test of your NFL fandom.
Well, I mean, it's an easy transition, fellas. If you want to go from Iowa football on Saturday to the National Football League and watch the Broncos, right? All you're changing is the uniform colors.
Don't say that. Kirk Ferentz will come
all
after
jokes
you,
is,
man. Kirk Ferentz is going to get mad at you for questioning his offense. He's only paid like $11 billion a year to go 500 every year. Come on.
It's unbelievable. I mean, you mentioned it, Jared. Though I mean, you have Jerry Jeudy on the outside, Cortland Sutton, who was recovered a couple of years ago from an ACL tear.
Really
but
good.
Outside of that, I mean, Javonte Williams was the massive injury for them.
Yeah.
It's a puzzling thing because I've felt this way for the last couple of years. This defense is good enough to win one or maybe even two playoff games. Now, granted, that's maybe not against Kansas City or Buffalo, but you steal an extra possession, maybe two, and all of a sudden your offense gets the ball and puts the football into the end zone. Denver's inefficiencies in the red zone has been an Achilles heel. Pat Surtain's fantastic. Obviously, Justin Simmons has returned. But the guys on the outside have to make some plays. They have to get some separation. And in years past, Russell Wilson would tuck the football and run. Doesn't do that, obviously, this year, whether it's that lat tear, the hamstring injury. Something's not clicking. But, Frank, I guess more to the point with the quarterback situation, if you are Denver, brand new management, would you be quick to pull the ripcord out and fire Nathaniel Hackett after the season, not only if they don't make the postseason, but if they don't accumulate at least 9 wins in the season?
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. I don't even know if it's going to be after the season anymore. I'd been telling people this is crazy. You can't be firing this guy in September. You need to give him some time. And then
No.
last Sunday, it's 16-9, one-score game, and fans are just flocking out of the stadium, leaving en masse.
Yeah, that's a bad look.
There's a new ownership group sitting up in the box that just spent $4.65 billion on this team, and you know that they're sitting there saying, wait, what the heck is going on? What did we sign up for? This isn't it. They're asking tough questions about what can we do? Wait, our fans are tuning us out now. They've gone from anger to apathy, and you don't want to be there in the NFL. So this new ownership is probably like, what do? We can't get out of the quarterback until 2025. If you look at that contract, it ain't happening until 2025. You can't just fire all the players. What can we do? Well, you can appease the fans by firing Nathaniel Hackett right now. I don't think it's – I mean, I think it's a little crazy to fire a coach before his first season's even done, but I can see it happening now. And trust me, a few weeks ago I was saying there's no way. Now I think that's actually really on the table if they don't turn things around pretty fast here.
Unless you're named Urban Meyer, right? He wouldn't last.
I mean, and that's the thing. Urban was all off. Urban was a
Urban made it to what, November, right?
And off the field. Yeah, in 13 games, I think. But his stuff was there was a lot of off fields. There's nothing bad about Nathaniel Hackett off the field. From all accounts, he's a nice guy.
That's the part about this, Frank, that's so ridiculous. And honestly, I know the NFL stands for not for long, and I know there's speaking of Nathaniel Hackett, there's another quarterback in Green Bay right now that's going through the similar trials and tribulations of, late career, what do I do, what's the problem, et cetera, et cetera. But to me, it's mind-boggling that Denver would fire this guy after 2 months. That is taking the NFL not for long acronym to an extreme level here.
All of a sudden, we're becoming the SEC over here, right? Everybody wants their coach fired after the first game. But I'm telling you, just being based in Colorado, if you go out at night and you bring up the Broncos to anybody, you better sit down because you're going to be in for about a half-hour rant about how the Broncos stink. Everybody
usually Denver's a pretty tame city. You guys are pretty chill up there at altitude.
Very chill. Very chill, but it's a passionate fan base, and I've never they were so excited for this season. Everybody was. I've never seen the excitement, even in the Peyton Manning years.
Wow.
Peyton Manning years, nobody knew Peyton Manning was going to be.
Let's just call it what it is. He was overhyped.
Yeah, he was. It was just but everybody was so excited to get off the Trevor Siemian, Case Keenum, Joe Flacco carousel.
Here's Russell Wilson.
Wow, let's go. Yeah,
you think they want to go back to Siemian now?
Oh my goodness! And then everything to crash down that quickly. Oof.
Yeah, but fellas, the reason why, and I have to say this as a resident Bronco homer in many different ways, that defense and how capable it is, especially the National Football League, where teams are running up and down the field more often than not. You feel like it's a Big 12 game. I mean, you're surrendering less than 20 points per game. Oftentimes less than 19 points per game. And so in a pass-happy league like this, where it is a track meet, all you need is average to good quarterback play, and Denver hasn't had it. I mean, you think about Drew Luck, Trevor Siemian. You go back to the days of Kyle Orton. That's how bad and putrid this offense looks. I mean, it's bad enough when you have memes that are out there and GIFs showing Tim Tebow is the only guy that could come back and rectify this offense and move him down the field. I mean, that's how bad it is. But I mean, this is a win now league. And I can't help but think, and you guys could attest to this feels like Adam Gase 2.0. Peyton Manning goes to bat for Adam Gase. He gets work. Nathaniel Hackett, backed by Aaron Rodgers, he gets work. I mean, sooner or later, these guys got to come do with what they're expected to do, and they're not matching it. We've had clock issues. You mentioned the fans leaving, Frank. How many fans in the National Football League are counting down the home team on a play clock? And that happened on numerous times this season. It's one of those things. If it happens in Kansas City, if it happens in Seattle, God forbid it happens in New York, I mean, they're coming for the coach right away. If it's not the quarterback, it's the coach. In this situation, you can't fire the quarterback.
Yeah, no, you can't. Trust me. I think I looked it up. It's like an $85 million cap hit to cut him in 2024. Okay, he's here for a while, and that's part of it too. Is the ownership group and George Payton, their general manager, have to be sitting there saying, "We're stuck with this quarterback. We got to get it right." Him and Hackett are it's not clicking for whatever reason. We need to find a coach where he can fix Russ and get him back on track because again, it's at least a 3-year commitment. Even in 2025, it's no picnic to cut him. It's still a huge cap hit. It's just a little more palatable. Yeah, it's just, trust me, it's just everything about the Broncos right now is bad. It is not. I'm not a Broncos fan, but being around Broncos fans, they're miserable right now. They are not happy with what's going on.
Yeah.
You know,
Great
one
stuff,
team
Frank.
that's not
Appreciate you coming
miserable
on,
per
bud.
se, but another.
Do we have another question?
Dude, I was gonna ask one more question, Frank, since you were
Keep rolling.
you're hanging out with us for one more quick peek. You had mentioned it, Jared, with the quarterback situation in Denver. Green Bay Packers have all kinds of issues right now, especially in the offensive end with Aaron Rodgers. I know the ayahuasca is not in his system anymore, but they've had trouble as well pushing the football down the field, losing to the Washington Commanders last week. Does this offense at any point in the year get on track, and do the playmakers that are relatively young for Aaron Rodgers finally click with him?
I can see it to an extent. I don't think this is ever going to be an elite offense this season, but the one thing I do wonder about the Packers compared to like the Buccaneers, who are kind of in the same bin, right? Talented team, expect to be contender, older quarterback who's just kind of fallen apart early this season. The difference with the Packers is I think the weather's going to help them, because if you look at this team, they're built to run the ball and play defense. It really hasn't happened that way. But trust me, I'm originally from Wisconsin. It gets cold and miserable there, as we all know. When December hits, maybe this team is built more like a December. We're going to just run it 40 times with A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. Aaron Rodgers is going to throw it 20 times, pick his spots. Maybe that's the kind of team that they could be and be effective playing that type of football. This, what they're doing right now, isn't working. Like Rodgers, like how many times an over/under Sunday night when they play Buffalo? How many times Rodgers looks over to the sideline swearing at Matt LaFleur? I mean, it's doing the whole like raising his hands and showing up his teammates. It's never Aaron's fault, right? Never his fault. Couldn't be him. It's just a miserable mess for the Packers right now, who are nowhere near the team on offense or defense that we expected them to be. I do think it's crazy they're getting 11.5 points on Sunday night, but I don't know what the ceiling is for this team anymore. If they lose to the Bills, which I think we all believe that'll happen, and the Vikings beat the Cardinals, which they're favored to do, the Vikings are up by 3.5 games in that division. I mean, it's
over.
It's getting late early in Green Bay. I mean, it's kind of, they need to figure this out fast, because they're in danger of becoming irrelevant this season.
Yeah. Frank, great stuff as always, my man. We appreciate you hopping on, bud.
No problem. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Frank. Jared, it's pretty wild to think about that. Frank had brought that up, and appreciate Frank for joining us from Yahoo Sports. Not being a game or two back, but being 3 games back of Minnesota's eye-popping. And you think about the Detroit Lions offense. For the first 3-4 weeks, they were moving up and down the field, and that's with Jared Goff, who can't launch the ball down the field, and Aaron Rodgers is kind of an arm, a future Hall of Famer as well. They can't do anything right offensively. We move from guys throwing pigskins around the field to what's going on in Major League Baseball. Yes, it's going to be Dodgers, Yankees, World Series. Check. Mets, Yankees, World Series. No. Phillies, Houston Astros. This is not 2 darling teams in Major League Baseball, but nevertheless, it's what we got for the Fall Classic. I'm personally excited. I'm a big baseball guy. I know you are too. There's a lot of meat on this thing. I just hope, for not only the networks, but for our sake, this is going longer than 4 games, which was the ALCS between the Astros and the New York Yankees.
Yeah, this is one of those series where I don't think the general public is going to be, engaged. You have a team, we talked about this yesterday, you have the Houston Astros who, I think have taken the mantle from the Yankees as the most hated team in baseball. And then you have the Phillies who, unless you are from Philly or you live in Philly, you don't like Philly sports teams, fans. I mean, they're a little, I love them. I have a lot of Philly sports friends. I like them personally, but they can be, I lived in that city as a New York sports fan. It was not a fun moment for me. I almost got battery to death wearing a Rangers t-shirt to a Flyers game one time. So it's not a city that is very endearing to the outside world. Philly people love it, obviously, but I just don't think it's going to be a series that captures the hearts and minds of America. So we really just have to look at it from a betting standpoint. And I think it's fair to say that there's a little bit of value on the Phillies to win the series, thanks to our pal Mattress Mac, who has made multiple 7- and 8-figure. I think it's a 7-figure wager that pays out 8 figures. And there are certain shops, that are shading the line a little bit more towards Philly because of that liability. So if you just want to talk straight betting value, probably a little bit on the Phillies. But I just don't like the matchup for the Phillies. I think their starting rotation actually can hang here. And you get Nola and Wheeler lined up for games 1 and 2 in Houston. And that's very positive because the Yankees had to send I think it was Severino and Montgomery, or Severino and Tyone to the mound in games 1 and 2 in Houston because they did not have the time or the rest to get their rotation solidified and lined up. So the long break between these series, I think, helps Philly a little bit, but I just see a very hard. I don't see a scenario where they go in and split and then, win all 3 back in Philly, because that to me is the only way they win this series. If they go back to Houston for 6 and 7, I think it's going to be a really tough ask for that bullpen to hang. The Astros are so much deeper in so many different ways. Philly needs a short series. And maybe they catch lightning in a bottle. They're kind of a team of destiny, but I just don't see it this year. I think the Astros win, and I think it's quick.
Yeah. And more to your point, too, when you talk about starting pitching and how this rotation is set up. Yeah, Astros weren't pressed at all against the Yankees. And you think about this and how you beat teams when you get, obviously, to the Fall Classic. Prior to that, you need to have at least your rotation set up. With the Astros bullpen not being taxed at all by the Yankees, you're going to get Justin Verlander. If, God forbid, if you're Philadelphia, you can find a way to get this to 7 games. You'll probably get Verlander for games 1, 4, and 7. That's a lot to ask for Philadelphia. Not beat him once, but potentially twice or even 3 times, especially for a guy that's probably going to win the American League Cy Young. On that note, though, Astros tonight, minus 165, Phillies plus 140. There's a couple different ways you could tackle this game, whether you're taking a winner straight up, you're taking the over-under total, you're taking the run line. In Major League Baseball, there's a couple different ways to cut this thing up. How would you, as a gambler, approach this sequence, especially when it's not an overwhelming favorite with Houston, but it's enough to be cautious about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Verlander is the guy. So it's really hard to fade him. It's just, I just don't, when you're asking me minus 165, so that's, I don't know, what's that, 60-ish percent? Let's put it in my little handy calculator here. 62%. So you're asking me if 62% of games does Verlander outpitch Aaron Nola? Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Once you get into the $2 range, that's probably where you start to back off a little bit because Nola's had a really good year. To me, I don't like betting individual. So I'll pull up my sheet right here. I'll tell you. The entire season, the entire Major League Baseball season, I have wagered on 11 sides. All of them have been full games. Yes, because I have a separate for first 5. 11 full game sides all season. It's not a bet I like to make because you not only have to cap the starting pitchers, you have to cap the sequence of the bullpen. You have to cap so many other little things that take place over the course of the game. And oh, by the way, there's no clock. It could literally go on forever. So it just, I really struggle with betting full game sides in baseball. I think there's so much more value on the wink, wink, nerfies or other props that are hyper focused on the starting pitchers. Because to me, baseball is a very simple game. The starting pitcher should be the reason why you either win or lose. It's not always the case, but when you boil it down to this guy against this lineup, it's a little bit more palatable of a handicap. So I have zero desire to bet any full games the entire World Series. I won't bet one. I might bet a series at some point. For instance, if Philly does steal this game tonight, make a case Houston to win the series would have a little bit of value there. But I just have very little desire to bet Major League Baseball sides because of so many things that are just not quantifiable throughout the course of the game after the starting pitcher leaves.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that. You're looking at the variables with the pitchers, but also the umpires. the ballpark that they're pitching in. I mean, Philadelphia has a short porch in right field. Also, the other element that we haven't discussed just yet, but Jose Altuve has been nowhere to be found so far in the first couple rounds of Major League Baseball's postseason. He's eventually going to wake up. But the bats, though, Bregman, obviously Altuve and company, those guys will come into play. And then, of course, with Justin Verlander, 18-4 this season with an ERA at 175. There's some cases where you'll mention it in a few different elements later on in the show where that'll be more advantageous as we go along. But yeah, certainly something to look at with Wheeler on the bump today. ERA just a hair over 3 this season. So he has fared well, but he's never been that guy in this situation against a daunting team with 105 wins throughout the regular season, blew everybody else away outside of the Dodgers during the regular year. It's a tall task, but we'll see if Philadelphia can slay the dragon. We go from Major League Baseball, the World Series, Jared, to college football, and we talked about this before the show started with the Utah Utes. They won last night, not convincing, without Cam Rising. Ugly for them, but they get it done. But there's a lot of different games that we have eyeballs on. Give me a few on your short list.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest game of the week is probably Kentucky and Tennessee. In terms of if one of these teams wins, we will, especially Tennessee, we will be very, very intrigued with the rest of the season for them. And again, the Vols are favored by a bunch. I would expect them to win the game. It's all to me about game script. And Kentucky likes to run the ball. That's their MO. Tennessee, their defense is okay against the run. It's really bad against the pass. So does Rick Scangarello, the offensive coordinator of Kentucky, does he give Will Levis the golden ticket? You know, we've heard for months now that Will Levis is the best quarterback prospect in this class. Some people buy it, other people don't. I watched Will. I'm a Penn State guy. I watched him for years in Nittany Lionville, and I'll be honest, when I was watching him back then, I wasn't thinking to myself, yep, that's the first quarterback that's going to get taken in that draft class. But there's buzz about him. You know, it's the size, it's the measurables, all that fun stuff. But are they going to let him eat in this game? Because I'll be honest, if Kentucky does let her rip, so to say, I think they can have some success against this Tennessee secondary. The other side of the ball, good luck, Mark Stoops. I don't know what you do to slow down Hendon Hooker. I don't know if there's a way to do it. But if there is a way, it's off the bye when you've designed some exotic blitz packages and you can maybe get in the backfield and cause some issues. But to me, this game falls squarely on the shoulders of Will Levis, who's actually done pretty well in pressure spots this year. He's got a good adjusted accuracy against the blitz, solid ADOT and passer rating when under pressure this year. But there's not as many weapons around him, and the Kentucky identity is running the football. So do they break tendency in this game? I think they'll have success if they do, but they've been a little stubborn in that regard this season. So we'll see if they give Levis a chance to cook.
One game that I'll be intrigued about is a game that'll be featured in the desert with Arizona and USC. And I bring that up because of this, is USC had a tough defeat in Salt Lake City a few weeks ago against the Utah Utes, losing 43-42. A game in which, people will say, well, that's the same old USC defense. That's Lincoln Riley's defense. But there were countless chances in that ball game for USC to put it away, but a personal foul here, a roughing the passer penalty there. All of a sudden, a third down situation that would have been a punt resulted in Utah getting an extended drive. Then they put points on the board, and the rest is history. Jordan Addison listed as day-to-day, but I'll be intrigued because not only is USC coming off of a bye week, but we'll see if their tweaks and adjustments defensively can render Arizona's offense a little mute. You think about the Wildcats, they're not a good team this season, but they can score the football. They can move up and down the field. And while USC is moving at a lightning pace right now offensively, that defense that was the best in terms of turnover margin really got beat up against the Utah Utes. And I know Tavion Thomas won't be around and Cam Rising won't be around in this situation, but the 10th ranked team in the nation with just one loss. Yeah, I know the Pac-12 doesn't get a lot of love, especially when it comes to the college football playoff format, but you have Oregon, you have UCLA, you have USC, obviously DTR and Caleb Williams are getting those Heisman Trophy looks. But if you're USC, you have to keep pace because Oregon put a thumping on UCLA a week ago. And so if you're a USC fan, one, you need to hope that obviously your team continues to put foot to floorboard. And then obviously you want Oregon to continue to win out because if they do play and eventually meet, that win against UCLA for the Oregon Ducks would prove to be fruitful for Lincoln Riley and his troops. But it's one of those situations with USC. You haven't been this close in such a long period of time, but with an offense that's been flying high, almost scoring 48 points per game, you need to make sure you take care of business against an undermanned Arizona team that you should quite handily beat. With that being said, Oklahoma State and Kansas State, that's another game I've been looking at. And the reason why was just because Kansas State lost Adrian Martinez last week against a TCU team that they had a comfortable advantage over. They are up by 18 points in one sequence. Martinez didn't even play in the majority of that contest. But they go back to Manhattan against a Cowboys squad that just overcame a deficit to beat Texas. That's a gritty team as well. We talk so much about the SEC, a lot about the Pac-12, the Big Ten, obviously with Ohio State and Michigan. But the Big 12 for you, it just seems like we get expectations high for a bit, Jared, and then all of a sudden they get into a college football playoff game, particularly Oklahoma, and they get laid out. For you, when you look at the Big 12 as a whole, are there teams that you feel like can be a threat? One of them in particular, TCU, who's still undefeated on the year?
It's not enough defense in that conference, I don't think. I'm a little worried about TCU's game this Saturday against West Virginia. That's a trap game if I've ever heard of one. The conferences that I think have a chance to win it this year, obviously the SEC, the Big Ten, and I think the Pac-12 has got a little starch. I do. I really enjoy watching that conference. I think there's some really good talent there, and I think the style is, I don't want to say it's as close to a professional style as you're going to get, but you got Bo Nix, you got some good quarterbacks in there that can move a little bit. You got Williams and Addison out there in Trojan land. I mean, there's some really good teams in that conference. I think the Pac-12 would be the one conference that maybe if they get a team into the playoff could steal it. But I'll be honest, USC's defense scares me. Oregon's defense is playing well. I think Oregon's defense can play a little bit, but I think it's pretty much the big three and everyone else outside of that.
Yeah, you mentioned TCU, 7-0 this season. They're almost scoring 45 points per game. And the biggest thing for them that you mentioned, which could be a trap for them at West Virginia, they've won the last 4 contests all against ranked opponents. And so you figure the emotions of getting up every week will eventually be brought down. It could potentially happen this week against a subpar opponent in the West Virginia Mountaineers. Let's Bet is presented by Superbook Sports, fellas, and the best place to bet is this football season. Download the Superbook app or visit superbook.com now. They'll match your first bet up to $1,000 whether it wins or loses. Plus, they already have lines up for every NFL game the rest of the season. The #1 voted sportsbook in Las Vegas, now available in the palm of your hands. Visit superbook.com to join. Yeah, it's like, gone are the days, Jared, of us using a Game Boy to play video games, and all of a sudden you can bet at your fingertips. Pretty nice. But segueing into that, plays of the day, what do you have lined up for us, especially on a Friday where I know we had some troubling conversations prior to getting on today about Thursday Night Football?
Yeah, so there's a couple on the site today. Matt Weisenfeld, Wise Guy's got a total for the Hornets Magic game. I had some, we had some people in the chat asking for NBA and NHL picks. So they are on the site right now. Wise Guy, Hornets Magic, and then Chadwick Wetzel, Penguins Canucks. He's got a money line play there. And of course, shout out to my guy, Zach Lucas, for those. I saw someone in the chat mentioning that last night or yesterday, he gave me 2 hockey picks that, we're getting some sharp money at the book there, and they both hit. Wild and Canucks. Canucks got their first win of the season. So I will continue to relay those to you once I get them. I have not received any this morning, but listen, we do the show every day. If I get picks, you guys are my first to know.
Will you ever be in the same seat as a Vancouver Canucks fan where you were compelled to not only voice your displeasure at a home game, but also take off your jersey and throw it onto the ice?
No, I'm not a big hooligan when I go to games. I like to sit with my beer and my pretzel and my hot dog, and I like to, because we work in sports. So when I go to a game, I like to detach from any angst. It's kind of funny. I went to, which game was it? I went to the BYU Notre Dame game a couple weeks ago here in Vegas.
Yeah.
And I went with Lauren Jabbar's dad. Shout out Gary Jabbar. And I remember he asked me, like, hey, who we betting on today? And I'm like, actually, Mr. Jabbar, I didn't make one wager on this game. And it felt like freeing to like attend a game and not have any like, I need this or I need this to happen and this. And I don't want to say it was freeing, but it was relaxing. I enjoyed the game a lot.
It's probably, it's got to be pretty liberating when you don't have any money. You're not chasing a number or a line or something.
We bet every day.
I guess I bet
every freaking day of my life. Like, it's like sometimes you just need to like, but like, and on that particular day, it was a Saturday. I had a million other college football bets. It wasn't like I wasn't betting on that day. I just didn't have a bet on BYU Notre Dame. And it was nice. It was like, it felt wholesome. Like I was a kid going to a game, eating my pretzel, drinking my beer, not as a kid, but watching the game. It felt really wholesome in a sense.
My biggest question for you in a game like that is who paid for the beer and what kind of beer did you have?
So Mr. Jabbar paid for the tickets, it was a great story. He actually had an extra ticket and he texted me, or Lauren texted me in the morning and asked me if I wanted to go. And I said, yeah, that sounds awesome. I paid for all the beers, obviously. I had a free ticket to the game. So
nice.
I forget what I had.
Well,
I don't even know if they serve at the Vegas Stadium. I think it was a Stella. I'm a big Stella guy. I like Stella.
All right. Stella for like $18.50, I would imagine, right?
It wasn't cheap. It was not cheap. I limited myself to one beer for that reason.
Fair enough. Now, what about you? Do you have a play of the day?
Yes, I do. And listen, for those that have been following this show for a long time, this should not come as a surprise, but I am going with the Nerfy tonight between the Phillies and the Astros. Of course, Verlander and Nola. I tweeted it out once the rotation was set, or once I kind of gleaned what the first, matchup would be. These two are 54-6 to the Nerfy during the regular season, and their postseason numbers have been pretty solid as well. And the one thing I like, so there's a couple things to keep in mind with the Nerfy in this game. So first of all, the pomp and circumstance that goes on before a World Series Game 1 is significant. I think it impacts the hitters a little more than the pitchers. The pitchers are in the bullpen. They're doing their own thing. They're not really involved in the festivities. But the hitters, each guy gets called out and they go through the line, handshakes and high fives, all that good stuff. It's a slower process in Game 1 of a World Series than any other game. There's more, again, pomp and circumstance involved. Secondly, I think the one thing that really matters here is you have two pitchers, especially Aaron Nola. You don't really face American League hitters very often. Justin Verlander's been around the block a really long time. He's got a little more exposure against some of these Phillies guys because of interleague play and all that stuff. But combined between these two pitchers, less than 100 at-bats against the opposing lineup. And Nola's been fantastic. He hasn't given up a home run at batting average below 200 to the Astros, very good Astros lineup, who are one of the best first-inning run-scoring teams at home in the major leagues this year. But again, the price here, comparatively speaking to what the hit rates of the Nerfies are, shop around for this price. Don't go laying 60 cents for it. There are better prices available if you shop around this Nerfie. I looked around multiple different sports books this morning. There was about a 20 or 30 cent difference between the high and the low. So the price obviously always matters. But listen, it's one inning. It's 3 outs on both sides. Both pitchers have fantastic Nerfie records. And I hope the celebration mood of the Astros stadium tempers the offenses at least for one inning, hopefully.
Well, the powers that be have brought me into pinch hit for Lauren on a few different times this season. And not to pump one's chest, but a perfect 4 for 4 on play of the day.
You have been doing really good with the plays of the day. I tracked them. You're doing
not
fantastic.
bad. I appreciate that. And Mark has been giving me some support along the way. So I'm going to put this up with you. I'm not going to go with no runs, but I will take a look at the first 5 with the Houston Astros. Part of that is obviously Justin Verlander playing at home, the more explosive bats. Houston on that run line for the first 5 is -0.5 at +100. I'm going to take Houston to win the first 5 with Verlander. So far this season, his ERA is below 2. It's sub 2 through the first 5 innings. The only time he's gotten in trouble this season at all has been in the 7th inning. This is not Clayton Kershaw. He's not going to disrupt at any point during the first 5, 6, 7 innings. I think if Philadelphia is going to get to them, it's going to be in that third or potentially fourth at bat. So I'm going to take Houston the first 5 to win this thing. Try to go a perfect 5 for 5 in my pinch hitting duties. Then I can run it back with you guys maybe in a week or two.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
job.
I'm trying. I mean, this is anything but Laker-esque, I guess we can say, right? I mean, the Los Angeles Lakers 0 for 4 so far in their first 4 games, probably going to get dismantled tonight by the Minnesota Timberwolves. Jared, there's just so much to chew on. I know you consume a lot, obviously, being in Sin City, but it's a great time of the year because you think about where we're winding down with Major League Baseball, where we're starting with obviously the NBA, National Hockey League, and then the NFL. It's a coin flip some weeks. Other games, like you mentioned, Thursday Night Football, you just don't know what the hell you're going to get from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Gray hairs come for some, but I guess the one thing that's always preached is no matter what you like, what you don't like, money management is priority number one.
100%. It was a really rough Sunday for me. Lost pretty much every bet that I made. And instead of going back to the well on Monday and beating my head against the wall, just take a day off. And I think that, and it's hard because we're in the content space. It's our job to promote the sports book, Superbook, their lines, the games, et cetera, et cetera. But I really struggle with just beating my head against the wall and doing the same thing over and over again and trying to get a different result. It's important. The mental health aspect to gambling, I think, is something that doesn't get, mental health in general is like a taboo topic. Like, oh, you don't talk about it. But in the gambling space, because of the stresses of watching and absorbing all of these games and these results on a weekly basis, it is so important for you to have a process, whatever that process is. It doesn't have to be the best process every week. You can lose, but as long as you stick to it and you don't wildly just throw bets against the wall trying to make up whatever you lost on Sunday, just take a breath, go back to your process and start it again. And if the process needs to be changed, well, that's something that's called growth and learning. My process changes all the time. For example, the public element to betting the NFL has changed a lot in the last couple of years that I've really been engaged here. And what I mean by that is I used to religiously track the line movements and see if there was any sharp reverse line movement on games. This year, don't even bother. It matters not at all. Honestly, the line movement on and off key numbers matters, but even that, I think, is, relatively speaking, muted. The reverse line movement is a sham these days. There's so many groups offshore moving these markets, and there's so many sports books. The market is so liquid that the little ticks up and down based off of who bets it is not something we should be concerning ourselves with. The things we should be concerning ourselves with: matchups, injuries, and trends. Those, to me, are the 3 things that we really hang our hat on with the NFL.
Yeah. It's an important note, especially these days, because who would have thought you'd be this late into the season? New York Giants, New York Jets, Seattle Seahawks have all shocked many of people. And then on the other side of things, Tom Brady's a couple of games under 500. Aaron Rodgers doesn't look right. Russell Wilson looks like a shade of himself from the Seattle Seahawks days. And there's lots of things. And who knows what you'll get from the Cleveland Browns when Deshaun Watson returns in week number 11. So just a lot of things. And obviously the injury component comes into play as well, too. But it could be a maddening time if you're a sports gambler taking action each and every day. And it's a great point, Jared. You don't need to fire every day, but you can be a good casual observant, or you could be good with your note taking and obviously take that week by week and learn from it. The action doesn't have to be sustainable 24/7. But nevertheless, I mean, you have a lot of different games that you could chew on. Obviously, NASCAR winding down. And then one of your favorites, college basketball, is about to tip off in a couple of weeks from now as well, too. So with all that being said, thanks again for obviously watching us. Make sure you do subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, the YouTube channel. Make sure you comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you again over the weekend. Week number 8 in the National Football League. Week number 9 in college football. Let's bet it by Superbook Sports. For Jared Smith, I'm David Gascon. Enjoy your Friday, everyone. We'll catch you again.